In this version of the news, we're going to talk about how CNN political contributor Shermichael Singleton, who's a Republican representative, used to work for Trump, pushed back on CNN host Abby Phillip during her news nightly show one of the days between Monday and Friday night. He simply said he was asked a question by Abby Phillip about the executive order that Trump signed this year that stripped Miles Taylor and Christopher Krebs, who were the chief of staff of Department of Homeland Security and director of the Central Intelligence Security Agency known as CISA, respectively. And so Shermichael, he pushes back, and he told Abby Phillips not to expect an answer that's different from the one he already gave. So don't dictate what comes out of his mouth. That is the reason why we're making this video, is for me to show you that clip. But before I do, I would like to get into the context behind why they were having this conversation in the first place, and what happened to another member of the Republican Party, Tulsi Gabbard, about 6 to 8 months ago, when she criticized Kamala Harris, who was the vice president at the time, and what she had to go through via TSA whenever she took a flight somewhere. And so we're going to get into all of that. But the context of their conversation was that President Trump, April 9th, signed an executive order that stripped security clearances from Miles Taylor and Christopher Krebs. Miles Taylor was the chief of staff of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and Christopher Krebs was the director of the Central Intelligence Security Agency, or CISA. So both of them had their clearances stripped. The reason why Miles Taylor had his security clearances stripped, and anything else that allows him to look at sensitive U.S. information, was because he authored anonymous op-eds and he wrote a book, and they were against Trump. And so I never read the book, but apparently there was enough evidence in there that Miles Taylor said, hey, I used my authority to undermine the Trump administration during Trump's first term from 2017 to 2021. The reason why Christopher Krebs got his credentials stripped, his security clearance stripped, was because he rejected the 2020 election fraud claims that Trump was making. And Trump loves loyalty, and Trump saw Krebs as not being loyal. So how does he respond to people not being loyal? He acts in retribution, and that included stripping him of his security clearance. And so, to be fair, the conclusion is that as of April 16, 2025, the evidence leaned towards Donald Trump signing executive orders targeting critics, particularly Miles Taylor and Christopher Krebs, with broader implications for free speech and the rule of law. The controversy surrounding these actions underscores the complex interplay between executive power and constitutional rights, with ongoing legal challenges shaping the future interpretation of measures. Okay, so now that we understand the context behind the conversation that they were having, let's get to the conversation.
The executive order here's what it says about Chris Krebs. Krebs, through CISA, falsely and baselessly denied that the 2020 election was rigged and stolen. That is in a presidential executive order, almost as if Bigfoot was real. What is going on?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you. I think this is probably one of the most dangerous things that we've seen from him. And we've seen a lot of craziness, but this is now taking the department and completely weaponizing against two people who just disagreed with him. One who told the truth and was involved as a witness in the congressional inquiry, and then somebody else who has said some things about him. The problem is we're back to now what he complained about throughout the campaign and his presidency, and that was that the Justice Department had somehow been weaponized. And now you see him essentially given a mandate and a directive by way of this presidential order to the department to move forward.
He signed 2 executive orders ordering investigations, weaponizing his Justice Department against people who just disagree with him. How do you justify that?
I mean, look, politically, my advice to the president on this one would be continue to focus on strengthening the economy. You got to figure out a way to bring down cost. Keep doing what you're doing as it pertains to immigration. We need to increase chip manufacturing within the United States. There are several political things that I think.
Okay, sure, hold on.
He needs to do.
All right, hold on. Okay.
And so
All right, Shermichael,
that's
I
what
get it. Yes, he should focus on the economy.
Yeah, he should.
But what do you think about the fact that he's targeting his political enemies, using executive
I
orders and
just don't
telling his
focus on
Justice
this.
Department?
But we are focused on it, Shermichael, and you just said, but Shermichael,
can I answer?
But you haven't answered, but you have not answered.
I did answer. I just didn't answer the way you wanted me to answer. You don't get to dictate my comments to my response on this show.
Your comments are not directed to the issue, the very question that she asked. And furthermore, Shermichael, you just said on this set, the last segment, you talked about this not being an unfair
Tiffany, 1 second.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Go ahead.
I mean, listen, Shermichael, you're a friend of the show. You're my friend. Please answer the question.
I answer the question the way I want. No,
no.
Going to dictate the way I answer questions on this show. You may not like the way I answer the question, but I gave an answer. No, I don't like that. We're not going to do dictating reply the way I want you to reply. Then just don't ask me a question if you don't like my response. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Shermichael, you don't get to.
Do we not live in a democracy now? We talked a lot about a democracy tonight.
You don't get to just change the subject to avoid having to say something that might be perceived as negative about Donald Trump.
That's what it
seems like. If you were a politician, a regular person on the street would say, well, that sounds like spin to me.
No, you asked a
question.
Because
it does sound
and
like
my
spin.
Response to your question was, instead of doing this, the president should be focused on X, Y, and Z. That is an answer to the question.
When I said this is why it's so dangerous, and this is an example of why it's so dangerous.
All right, so you heard that, right? Plain and clear, Shermichael Singleton was not happy about the forced groupthink that they were trying to push on him, and good on him for pushing back. I hope he continues to push back. And out of all the things that CNN, NBC, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, all the syndicates for the Democratic Party, out of all the things that they could be talking about how to get the economy better, how the Democrats could work with the Republicans a lot better in Congress to push Trump's agenda along. There has to be focus on compromising, on keeping the tax cuts in place so we won't end up even in a more dire situation than we are now, barely to afford the cost of living. And there's so many things like peace between Ukraine and Russia, trade war, reciprocal tariffs, and the effect that it's having on the economy. They could talk about any number of things, but they chose to talk about things that really American people don't care about. But I want to point out the hypocrisy on CNN. While they're talking about Trump using executive orders to target his critics, Biden and Harris did the same thing to Tulsi Gabbard. Take a listen.
For presidential race. Now she's fighting back.
The federal air marshal whistleblowers came forward and exposed the truth and provided evidence about how one day after I criticized Kamala Harris on a televised national interview, talking about how dangerous the consequences would be if she were to serve as president and commander-in-chief, the very next day I was placed on a domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies that almost nobody, including members of Congress, know much about. Given no reason why I was put on the list, there's no due process to say, hey, show me what you got and take me off the list. As far as I know, the last time I asked, I heard that the targeting package that the TSA built against me is still operational. I hope that Congress takes this up. I'm pursuing legal action, working with Jay Sekulow and the ACLJ, because I'm not the only one who is being impacted by this. There are many Americans whose names will never make headlines who have also been wrongly targeted by this administration, specifically because of their political views and their exercise of their right to free speech.
All right, so you heard that. A little bit of interruption in what she was saying was that, look, the bottom line for Tulsi Gabbard is she is a very successful woman, and she was a former Democrat that changed to the Republican Party. Democrats are not happy about that. And she she brutalized Kamala Harris during the 2020 presidential campaign when both of them were vying for the Democratic Party nomination. Decimated her. And then as recent as 8 months ago, Tulsi Gabbard got on television criticizing Harris again, telling the American people how detrimental to the country it would be if she were elected the president. Bottom line. And I am going to conclude this video by providing you with a short summary of Shermichael Singleton. He is the reason why I chose to make this video. I like his pushback. He's only 33 years old, born in 1991. Let me just read it right here, right? Shermichael Singleton is a political consultant, writer, commentator, and former contributing host of Vox Media's Consider It, a current affairs digital show that aired weekly on Facebook Watch. He is also a 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree for law and policy for his contributions to politics and media, to include CNN. And so, you know, he was born in 1991. He's from New Orleans, and, you know, he's a very smart young man. And so if you haven't had a chance to check out this young man, please do so. And if you like this version of the news, show your appreciation by hitting the thumbs up, the subscribe button, and the notification bell so that you can get updated every time I make new material. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one.